That's the Minister for Democratic Institutions, Dominic LeBlanc. We also requested an interview on this subject with Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. We did not receive a response to that request, or I believe he's not available. We did, however, also speak with NDP Leader Jagmeet Singh. Have a listen. Hi, Mr. Singh. Good to see you. Thank you for making the time.
My pleasure.
I'm wondering, it's been a few days now since Mr. Johnston stepped aside. Do you have any regret for the role you played in leading to his resignation?
Well, I want to make it clear, I don't think this is Mr. Johnston's fault. I think that from the beginning, there shouldn't have been a special rapporteur. It was the wrong, perhaps, decision to go down that path. And then when the appearance of bias was so obvious, the right thing to do was for Mr. Johnston to step down. He finally did it. Our motion was calling on him to do so. I feel like there was pressure from the will of the House indicating that there wasn't confidence in him continuing. There was the pressure that was mounting, and then Mr. Johnston did the right thing.
You didn't disagree, though, initially with the appointment of a special rapporteur. The Conservatives were initially very critical. You kind of indicated that you would give the government a chance on that. So why now are you saying that you don't agree with the idea of the position?
No, from the beginning, I always said that I thought the public inquiry was the right way to go. And I made that very clear. Despite that, I was willing to give Mr. Johnston a chance, but I still thought it was the wrong decision from the outset.
I know that you sort of flagged the appearance of a conflict of interest. Does that mean that you didn't think that there actually was a conflict of interest? And if there wasn't really one, isn't that problematic now that he no longer can occupy that position?
Well, the appearance of bias is just as important whether or not there is bias or not when someone has been given the role of trying to restore confidence, because they can't really restore confidence if the appearance is so biased that the public doesn't feel like the decisions or conclusions are those that have weight. And that's why the appearance is just as important as whether or not there is truly partiality or bias.
The government says that there's nobody really who, they've kind of intimated that there's nobody really who could occupy that position, who you or other opposition parties won't start saying there's an appearance of a conflict of interest, that basically almost you and your colleagues in the opposition are motivated to not have that person be somebody with authority so that this story stays alive. Your response to that?
Not at all, not at all. There's a number of people that would have qualified or would have satisfied the criteria. The Rouleau Commission is one we point to. There were attempts to make it seem like there was an appearance of bias, but they had no substance, and so they did not stick. And rightly so. There was no real objection. And I always say, except for maybe the most extreme critics, most reasonable people will look at that commission that went into the question of the Emergencies Act being invoked and found that that was a reasonable process, that they could see the evidence in front of them. There's cross-examination of witnesses. Witnesses testified and gave oaths to their testimony. And that was something that gave confidence in the decisions that were made.
Does it have to be an inquiry? And I know that you have said previously that it does. And the reason I ask again this time is because I was looking back at some of the other sort of investigations of secret and intelligent, sort of classified documents that the Parliament has really conducted in the past. The Afghan detainees, a group of parliamentarians got together, they were granted access, they reviewed it, and then a panel of judges reviewed those documents to see what could be made public. Is something like that not possible and perhaps as productive as the inquiry you're calling for?
I think at this time, given all of the mismanagement and mishandling of it by the Liberal government and by Prime Minister Trudeau, given how poorly it's been handled, the only real way to restore confidence is to have that dual element of the independence of a public inquiry plus the transparency, the public element of it, to cross-examine witnesses, to see those questions being put in a rigorous way with that vigor of a public inquiry, and having it done in a public forum, I think is the only way forward now.
Even if national security is essentially compromised by making those documents public? I mean, that's the real problem that David Johnston highlighted, right? The stuff we're dealing with, it's not even necessarily stuff that we saw during the convoy that was then eventually made public. This is like national security in the vein of this is a foreign state actor and their plans to intervene in our election. That stuff just can't be made readily public.
I agree 100% that there's certain information that would actually undermine our own security in a very profound way. The nature of the sensitive documents is such that if certain information came out, we wouldn't be able to keep our informants safe, we wouldn't be able to keep the people that do this work safe, and we would not be able to do the work. So I understand that. But there have been CSIS counterintelligence officers that have testified in committee that said there's absolutely a way to keep that information secure, to keep private information that is sensitive in nature not put to the public, and that instead of having a special rapporteur decide that, you would have a judge, an independent judge, decide what information should be public or not, but there would still be the rigor of cross-examination of that information that could be public.
The government has basically said, okay, now it's up to you and other leaders of the opposition to arrive at some consensus on who might lead that inquiry. Is that an effort you're willing to undertake?
So what I've said to that is absolutely, I'm prepared to do work necessary to move forward, and we've already started that work. In my motion calling for Mr. Johnston to step down, which we were the party that pushed that forward, that motion passed in the House. We also included that PROC should begin the work of setting terms of reference. A committee in Parliament should also be looking at the criteria of who should be the person to lead the public inquiry. And so we've laid out some of that criteria. Some simple steps: a judge or former judge, someone who hasn't donated to a political party in recent years, and someone that has no affiliation with the Trudeau Foundation in this particular circumstance. Those are starting points. We've seen judges that have worked. The Rouleau Commission I point to is one example of one that worked, and the judge was someone that was absolutely above board. And there's ways to do that.
Just to be clear, though, does that mean you want PROC to do that work, the committee in the House of Commons, or are you and Mr. Poilievre and Mr. Blanchet going to get together and do that work yourselves?
I'm open to either way. The PROC work has already begun because of our motion being passed. That work has already begun in PROC. So in that committee, that's already started. I'm happy to supplement that with additional meetings, but we can do that. That is absolutely something achievable, to lay out the criteria and to come to a consensus around who is chosen.
Has there been any communication between you and other opposition leaders about the possibility of that meeting?
No.
No? And are you going to reach out?
I'm happy to do so. I'll put it out to the public that I'm happy to do it and I look forward to it. The PROC committee process is already starting that work. And in addition, I could supplement that by having a meeting.
Do you think you and the other opposition leaders could arrive at a consensus?
Oh, yeah.
You do?
Well, I look at when I was a provincial member of Parliament in Ontario, the way we selected all officers, whether it was the Auditor General or any other officer, was done in a committee where each recognized party had one member. The Speaker was the chair, non-voting, and there had to be a consensus. And I was a part of the committee that chose the Auditor General, for example. That was a process that works. We can do something similar.
Okay, Mr. Singh, I'll leave it there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.